All right. I think we're back. Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, everyone. This is our weekly series where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. I believe this is episode 10. I'm joined today by Jordan, our video producer, and I think we got a pretty good show planned for you. So if you don't know who we are, Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy-related information, and we have a community on our forum in Mailx and other platforms where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. So let's kick off the show like usual with what we've been working on at Privacy Guides this week. The biggest thing that we put out is our staff writer M wrote an article on Mastodon. For those of you who haven't heard, Mastodon recently released their 4.4 version that has a lot of new features. So the article covers some of that stuff, covers the privacy and security benefits of Mastodon over other social media platforms, and includes a tutorial on how to set up your account in the most secure and private way. So it's a really good article if you use Mastodon, or if you don't know much about it and you want to learn about it. Definitely go check it out on our website. It's called Privacy and Security on Mastodon, and it's the latest article on our site so far. So that's pretty cool. Other site changes, it's been a bit of a slow week as far as updates goes. We're still working on some stuff behind the scenes and getting translations done, but not a lot of big releases. So I think that kind of wraps up what we've been working on the site. I'll pass it over to Jordan, who can maybe share a bit about the stuff they're working on and potentially some future video information. So Jordan, what's going on with you?
Yeah, thanks, Jonah. I guess on the video side of things, I've been working on a review of Secure Blue, like I mentioned last week, which is turning out to be quite a monster video. So I think you should all look forward to that. If you haven't heard of it before, I'd definitely recommend checking it out. Um, and we've also got another video in the pipeline about browser fingerprinting, which should also be quite interesting, I think, because there's a lot of people who are asking questions about that topic, and we're hoping to have some experts like weigh in. So I think that'll be a very interesting video too. But that sort of wraps up like the video projects that we're working on currently. So I'll just hand it
Very
back to you,
cool.
Jonah.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that video, especially the browser fingerprinting one. I mean, the Secure Blue one is going to be great, but I have heard so much about browser fingerprinting this week, and I think we're going to talk a bit more about that later on in the stream because there's been a lot of good discussions on our forum about Tor project and browser fingerprinting that I think will be really educational. But we'll get back to that soon. Thanks, Jordan. I think we can move on to some of the news in privacy and security from over the past week. So uh, we might as well start with this first story here on our list. This is on a blog called Koi Security on Medium. The headline is Google and Microsoft trusted them, 2.3 million users installed them, they were malware. And this story is basically about a pretty simple color picker browser extension that had secret malware built into it, basically, which is a big problem that we see with browser extensions in general. And this article kind of dives into other malicious extensions that infect a ton of users on Chrome and Edge, and we see that stuff bypass the Chrome Web Store's restrictions all the time. So basically, the TLDR that they have for their article is that their investigation of this extension exposed a coordinated campaign that infected a massive 2.3 million users across Chrome and Edge. So, a really interesting article. It basically, they would hijack and monitor your browser activity if you had this extension installed. So every time that you visited a website, according to this blog, the extension would capture the URL of the page you're visiting. They would send it to a remote server. And then they even had the option to automatically redirect your browser to a different website if their remote server basically instructed it to. So very dangerous stuff. It's crazy that this stuff is still sneaking in past Chrome's web store restrictions, and definitely something to watch out for. But it's like we say in privacy guides in all of our browser recommendations, you really do need to minimize the amount of extensions that you have installed because they do have a lot of privileges within your browser to control the things that you see, and they can monitor things that you do. And so, while you don't necessarily have to go with no extensions whatsoever, limiting it severely to like the most trustworthy extensions you need, like uBlock Origin or your password manager, and kind of getting rid of everything else, is super important. And it's probably one of the biggest things that most people can do for their browser security. So I would definitely take this story as a warning. And if you have 15 browser extensions installed on your computer, definitely check them out and maybe get rid of the ones that you don't need or use or trust anymore. Jordan, did you have any other takeaways from this article?
Yeah, actually, I think there's probably one thing that like took me by surprise on this specific article, and that's that these extensions in particular were actually verified. So I think it's important to remember if you're installing an extension and it says that it's featured or verified, that isn't always like a guarantee of security here. Like, there's a lot of extensions that are verified or featured that could be implementing malware at one point. Like, with these specific extensions, they weren't malicious by themselves, but they were later activated to spread this malware. So I think it's important to remember, like, even if something says it's got a lot of installs, it's got reviews, it's verified, it's better to actually just reduce the amount of extensions that you've got installed to like a very specific few. And in particular, like you said, at Privacy Guides, we really don't really recommend many extensions. I think we only recommend one, which is uBlock Origin. So yeah, definitely be careful with that and try to avoid installing them if you can, because like Jonah said, it's like quite a big attack vector because there's quite a lot of permission that an extension has on your computer, on your browser, sorry. So I would definitely, as a takeaway, just like have a look at what extensions you actually have installed and try and think about like, do you really need it? Because in a lot of cases it is kind of risky. So that's kind of what my takeaway was.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is crazy that they had like all these trust signals like the verified. I don't really know how verification on the Chrome Web Store works in depth too much. I know that like on Firefox's side of things, they have their recommended extensions, which is sort of a similar trust badge, and they claim to like actually look at the source code of these extensions and do some sort of security audits to make sure this doesn't happen. Like their team will. I also know that there's a lot fewer recommended extensions on Firefox than there are verified extensions on Chrome. And knowing how Google works, I'm guessing it's some sort of automated feature. But that is definitely something to look into. Because yeah, it's not good. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps that up. What's the next article we have on our list, Jordan?
So this is definitely kind of an interesting story that like I think a lot of people are excited for. So that's why this is the head story for this week's live stream. So this is an article from Android Authority, and it's Google confirms it's combining ChromeOS and Android into a single platform. So, quoting from the article, a Google executive has reportedly confirmed that the company will combine ChromeOS and Android into a single platform. This news comes after we reported in November that ChromeOS will be merged into Android. This also follows Android 16's release, which brings several desktop-themed features to the platform. So if you weren't following originally, in Android 16 there was a update to the desktop features that were added. So originally with the Pixel 8 series, there was the ability to connect an external monitor to your Android device. And that allowed you to basically have like a sort of desktop mode where you could use the monitor in conjunction with your phone. And that was sort of in Android 16, they added more like desktop features as well. So this is kind of an interesting story because I think we kind of saw that this was going to happen eventually at one point, because they have been sort of teasing that Chrome OS and Android might merge eventually. So that's kind of my takeaway from this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I don't really know what to make of it myself. Thinking about the other Android news that we've been hearing recently, like a few weeks ago, we of course, most of us saw that they were not releasing source code updates in advance anymore for like the Pixel devices and stuff like that. They were kind of taking their hardware side and their Pixel side in a more proprietary direction than Android typically is. And um, of course, this has been going on for a long time where they've been stripping features from the Android open source project, like the dialer and the messenger, even, and bringing them into like Google branded stuff. And this could definitely go one of two ways. It would be great if the Chromebook ecosystem became a bit more open, like the Android ecosystem currently is. I know that, you know, I've seen a lot of demand for something like a Vanadium OS Chromebook alternative where you can have a hardened browser and nothing else on your laptop and have it be lightweight and fast, and potentially this presents a pathway that could go in that direction. But this could also certainly be a case where by combining these platforms, Google is kind of making a brand new operating system for their future Pixel devices and leaving Android behind. I think that's also a distinct possibility that we have to be a bit worried about, because if they decide that this is something else and they aren't making it open source, like Chrome OS is somewhat open source, but it's pretty locked down compared to Android right now. And if they go in that direction with their future Android development, it could be even more bad news for custom ROM, custom Android OS developers in this space. So I don't know. This has been probably a long time coming. It seems like Google is always back and forth on these operating system stuff, and you never really know where they're going. But now it seems like more of a concrete plan, and so we'll just kind of have to wait and see how it turns out. I think because Google kind of just does their own thing without a lot of input from other people, so it could really go in any direction, I think.
I think the thing that people are most like excited about for this update in particular is like we don't actually know concretely which direction this is going to go. Is Chrome OS and Android, are they going to be combined to just be Android? Is Chrome OS just going to become Android? That's what like a lot of people are saying, right? Or is it going to go the
Yeah.
other direction? We don't actually, according to this article, they didn't give any like extra details about that. So I think that there is definitely like a desire from a lot of people to have this sort of like secure desktop operating system, because Android does take a lot more security precautions compared to like actual like a lot of other desktop operating systems. So I think that could be quite interesting if it ends up being that Chrome OS does just become Android and you could run that on like, whatever computer. But I think there's definitely a concern about like whether the like open source, whether Google is going to make this open source or they're going to restrict it like they have with AOSP, like hide a lot of the changes that are good behind proprietary like apps and things. So I think it's definitely an interesting idea that Google's doing here, but we'll see how it pans out because it may not end up being what people want, unfortunately.
Yeah. A lot of interesting points. Like I said, we'll just have to wait and see because it could go in either direction. But there's definitely promise. I know people have wanted something like this on the desktop for a long time, and it's slightly more possible now, I think. So those people might be a bit excited, but we'll see how this turns out.
Yeah, so
I think.
okay. Sorry.
Sorry. We'll move on to the next story, I think, if that's all right with you. Um, our next story is from IVPN. It's actually a product launch announcement. So IVPN has been recommended for a pretty long time by privacy guys. We like the stuff that they're doing a lot, and they are now launching in beta a service called Mailx, which is an open source email aliasing service, similar to the other ones that we recommend, like Simple Login, basically. So their blog post, which was posted on the 14th, so a few days ago, said, today we're launching Mailx, an email aliasing and forwarding service built and operated by the IVPN team. Mailx is in closed beta, first available free to IVPN Pro customers with at least 1 year of remaining time on their account, with new invite rounds to follow. So if that applies to you, it sounds like you can log into your IVPN account and navigate to the Mailx beta tab on their website and try it out. But it seems to be, based on the screenshots and other information in this article, a pretty standard email aliasing service, like that we've seen from other providers. And I think it's pretty cool that IVPN is getting into this. It's the email aliasing space is it's a bit tricky because it does require a lot of trust for you to have in that provider, which is why like Simple Login, if you use ProtonMail, it was kind of easy to recommend because your mailbox provider and your aliasing provider is the same. This would be different since IVPN isn't an email host, but you could use it with other providers, and you can protect that content with PGP encryption, like other email aliasing services allow you to do. So it does allow you to kind of remove some trust required in your mailbox provider, but then you place that trust in IVPN. And I think that some people will find that to be a pretty good deal. I know a lot of people trust IVPN to make secure stuff, and they use it as a VPN themselves. And if that's you, this might be a good option for you. It's always good to have more competition in these spaces and in the email space and in the email aliasing space specifically. So I think it's always good to have a lot of different options to choose from because you do have to trust them a lot. The downside, of course, with all of these services is that they do kind of lock you in because it's very hard to change emails across all of your accounts if you later decide you don't like the service. So I don't know. This is something that we'll definitely look into more. It's cool that IVPN has apparently proactively audited the security of this, and it's fully open source. That's all good signs. I haven't read the audit yet, and it's something that we're definitely going to look into if we think about adding it as a recommendation on our website. And I don't know if there's a forum discussion about this on our forum already, or if we'll make one after this, but either way, I think if you have any thoughts about Mailx, definitely share it in our community and share any information that you have, because we'll all have to come together and kind of make a decision about whether or not we should recommend this. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. I think it's cool. Was there anything noteworthy about this announcement to you, Jordan?
Yeah, I think that IVPN has already proven themselves to be quite a good company when it comes to security and their auditing processes. They're regularly getting their IVPN service audited and all these things. So I think, it's already a really good start, especially for a service that's just released to at least a small subset of users. The fact that they've already got that security audit down and they're already showing that they're very concerned about this sort of thing already puts them in a good position from a trust and transparency perspective. And also just there's some snippets from the report just here, which I'm showing on the screen. But basically they found that there was no major concerns and that there was solid security practices. So I think, especially coming from IVPN, who's already a really trusted VPN provider, this is incredibly good to see, especially because, like Jonah said, it's always better to have more options than less options. But I think one concern, if you are considering switching to this service, they don't have a custom domain option available just yet. So if you are an IVPN customer and you are thinking about trying it, that might be a bit of a stop. It might stop you from switching. So that's something to note. But yeah, I think this is really good news that there's going to be another possible provider that we can recommend, but obviously it has to be checked by the community first, and there has to be a discussion around that first. So definitely check out the blog post here if you want to check it out. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, that is a good note. I missed that, but yeah, that will be important for them to add. But it looks like it is planned. Let us know in the comments or in the chat or on the forum later if you plan on using this or if you test it out or if you want us to look at it, because we might, we can definitely review this product and post kind of more in-depth thoughts if that's something that people are interested in. We're always looking for stuff to review. We just have so many options to choose from. But if there's interest from you all in getting some of our writers' thoughts on this, we can definitely add it to the list and get that done. So, yeah.
Okay, so moving into the next story, this is going to be a exciting one for Linux users in the audience. This is a story from OS Technics, and the title is Linux reaches 5% desktop market share in the United States. For the first time, Linux has officially broken the 5% desktop market share barrier in the United States of America. It's a huge milestone for open source and our fantastic Linux community. This new data shows a significant shift is happening. I'm not sure if I would say significant, but I would say there's definitely trending in a good direction. So there's the Stat Counter Global Stats for June 2025, and apparently according to that, there is a 5% desktop market share in the United States with Linux. So I think we've kind of seen that like a lot of this has sort of been trending in a direction, and whether this is like completely related to Linux on the desktop or it's more of just because there's like Steam Decks and there's like, that's contributing to it, I'm not sure. But just to put it in perspective, Windows is at 63% market share, Mac OS X is at 16%, and Mac OS is at 7%. So Mac OS and Linux are looking pretty similar now. Like there's not that much between them. So I think that
Well,
definitely puts it in some perspective.
you do have to remember OS X and Mac OS means the same thing. So I don't know why they split it like that.
I think it's because like Mac OS is like 11 onwards, and then
Yeah.
Mac OS. I don't know why people are still using Mac OS X. That's a bit concerning, actually.
Yeah, that is strange to me. So, I mean, from that perspective, Linux is still a bit behind. It also could be. I wonder how that works. I wonder if it's like if Intel Macs report differently. I don't know how Stat Counter gets their stats. They're kind of weird, but I mean, it's been consistent and it's a good trend to see nonetheless. And it's really interesting to me that Linux has surpassed ChromeOS, which has pretty wide adoption. So I think that is a really good sign for Linux. I've talked about this before, like Linux on the desktop and how things are kind of changing in that space. And I think that the Steam Deck does have a lot to do with it. Like you said, I think that is a big factor. And I think that gaming is what's going to get a lot of people into Linux who wouldn't otherwise use it. And then they'll find that for all the non-gaming stuff, like stuff on the internet and boring things that most people do with their computer every day without really thinking about it, Linux has always been really good at that stuff. And so there's really no reason to switch now that Linux kind of covers the more advanced use cases for more and more people. So I think that that's huge, and I personally think that the Steam Deck is behind a lot of that, and so I think that has been a really good change in this ecosystem. And I don't know, I think it's great news. It's good to know.
Yeah, so I think another thing to like note as well is like we're coming up to the October 2025 Windows 10 end of support period. And a lot of people have their computers that aren't supported by Windows 11. And Linux sort of presents this alternative to people because I think a lot of people are kind of getting a bit tired of Microsoft and how atrocious they are in terms of privacy and also in terms of just like user freedom in general, like they sort of have restricted people's access to Windows 11 based on their hardware. Like, I know there are security benefits, obviously, with Windows 11, and that's why they made like hardware requirements. But I think, with Linux, it's presenting this sort of alternative to people that don't really want to get rid of their computer currently because it's still working. Like, even like 6th gen or 7th gen Intel processors are still, usable for most people. And I don't think that's sort of what people want to do. They don't want to throw away their computer, they don't want to upgrade. So that's probably another thing that's pushing it. And that's what this article also does um, highlight. So I think that's another important thing. And like Jonah said, like the Steam Deck and also like Linux gaming has gotten a lot better, especially since the Steam Deck came out. So I think a lot of people are realizing, especially I've seen a lot of YouTube videos recently about people switching to Linux. I think, it's becoming more and more possible for a lot of people, especially because now there's a dwindling amount of software that's not supported. There's still some, issues like anti-cheat and, you know, some very specific software that won't run on Linux. But it's becoming better and better, especially because the Steam Deck is pushing this this forward in a lot of ways. So I think it's really interesting that it's reaching this sort of high margin, and especially because, like Jonah said, it's actually beating ChromeOS according to this, which is very surprising to me as well, because ChromeOS is like most commonly used in like education and stuff, and I would have thought that would have been quite a large percentage, but apparently according to this, no. So
Yeah, I
that's
would have thought the
interesting.
same thing. So I kind of want to look into later how they figure out those stats because it does seem not quite right to me for the same reason you just said, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might have something to do with like the visitors that visit their website or something like that. So either way, I think it was good to talk about this because, it is an alternative for people. Like, Linux is an alternative to Windows, and I think it is getting a lot better. So it's worth thinking about whether you want to upgrade your computer or whether Linux might be a better option, especially for your privacy. So yeah, that's sort of that story.
Yeah, all good notes. And definitely, if you're using Windows right now and you haven't used Linux in a while, or if you've never used it at all, uh, definitely give it a try and check out some of the Linux articles on our site for some information because it has changed a lot recently, and I think it might be a better experience now than it was before. Um, but I think we can move on to our next topic, which is kind of all about age verification. We have a few different stories, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about last week a bit too with search engines, but now we're coming around to social media. So this article from Ars Technica, the headline is Reddit's UK users must now prove they're 18 to view adult content. Um, Reddit hires company to verify user age with selfie or photo of government ID. So a lot of these apps, like Reddit before, you could kind of self-verify and just say you can opt into that content. There's been a lot of like restrictions on this kind of stuff from the App Store on iOS, for example, or other things where they kind of try and hide it by default, but it's not like a super privacy invasive thing you have to do if you want to opt into viewing that stuff. Um, Now it sounds like in the EU you will have to do ID verification and you have to do it with a third party, which presents a whole host of security and privacy issues, of course, because all of these companies, they know why you're verifying your ID, of course. They're getting that information usually in basic photographic form. It's not secure at all. And even if they claim to delete it, if they're misconfigured or if they're lying about that or if they're collecting that metadata about your ID and just deleting the picture, all of those things can present um, huge security and privacy issues. And we see data breaches every day. We see, the whole data broker situation where your information is sold in large databases is only getting worse. Um, and all of this age verification stuff just kind of ties into that. So in this case, according to Ars Technica, Reddit said that they're contracting with a company called Persona, which will perform the verification on a photo of your government ID. Well, it says either an uploaded selfie or a photo of your government ID, so it might be the case that they're doing like AI age verification based on your face in some cases. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but Reddit will not have access to the uploaded photo, and Reddit will only store the verification status along with the birth date you provided. Um, so that's Reddit's side of things, which is probably true. I think a lot of these age verification services, they don't share that information with the companies that contract them. But of course, the third party company, Persona in this case, is getting all of that information, and that can definitely present the concerns that I was talking about earlier. Um, so yeah, not great news in the UK, I would say. Did you notice anything that stood out from this article, Jordan?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember this is like a sort of result of some legislation that passed in the UK, which is called the Online Safety Act, which basically requires companies to verify people are at a certain age. So that's the reason why we're seeing, especially in the UK now, companies do have to, if they don't verify users, they can get fined or they can be, face legal repercussions. So that's why now quite a lot of companies in the UK are starting to do this. And I think one important thing here is um, these companies that like collect your ID, they are usually going to be much more highly targeted than like other companies because of the treasure trove of data that they hold. And I also think there's like sort of a um like there's a lack of transparency over how long they store the ID for and like how they process it, which I think could be something that needs to be addressed. Maybe there's like a couple of different like ideas that are coming out now, like there's sort of these digital ID systems that are trying to be like rolled out to like sort of bypass this entire idea of having to share your ID with like a third party company, which is something we're actually looking into at Privacy Guides. There's someone who's doing a bit of research into the topic, and I don't know if that will end up being a safer method than just sending your ID directly to these third party companies, but I would say anything is better than that. Um, that's what I would say.
Yeah, there's a lot of different proposed solutions out there, and this is definitely like this is the worst possible scenario out of all of them that we're at right now with all of these age verification stuff. No one has built a better solution yet, and so we're all kind of at this like verifying basically photos, which isn't secure or private at all. Um, so it this whole age verification stuff, we've said it before, and I've written a bit about this myself in the past, but it presents a huge danger to privacy and, of course, your freedom to access information in general, because this technology is just going to be used to lock information behind these walls that you either won't want to pass because you don't want to give your ID and information out to someone else and let them know that you specifically are accessing this data. The internet's really good for accessing stuff anonymously, and I think that that's a huge benefit that a lot of people take for granted. But the ability to research topics without it being tied to your like legal government identity, it's a huge benefit of the internet, and that's going to go away. And even if you do, and even if you do want to verify, in some cases, you might not be able to. I mean, it's not the case where everyone necessarily has like valid ID in some cases, even, or there's so many restrictions and barriers for some people in groups to to verify their identity in this kind of format in the first place, that it kind of creates a way for governments and other agencies and organizations to kind of block off certain people from accessing content, people who they don't like or don't want to support in this way. We're getting to the situation where we're centralizing a lot of power in these governments like the UK, and that's of course exactly what they want. In the UK specifically, they've been going down this path for a very long time. They have a lot of restrictions on the internet, um, and it's only gotten worse and worse in the past decade. But all of this whole problem and all of the proposed solutions present serious challenges that I haven't really seen addressed. And while there are certainly more private ways to do it, like I said, this is the worst possible case. There isn't really a way to do this where everyone's freedom is protected and there are no concerns at all um, because the whole age verification thing, at the end of the day, it kind of ties into the government allowing or not allowing you to access certain websites. So it's a dangerous path. It's unfortunate that we're seeing this in the UK, and I know we have a few more stories about this that we'll look at next, but we'll just have to keep reiterating that if this does apply to you, or if this is your government, you should definitely consider speaking out about this or doing whatever you can to get this changed, because, I mean, at the end of the day, neither of us are in the UK, so there isn't much that we can do about, like, other countries' politics, but it is the stuff that I think everyone has to be worried about, because that kind of thinking spreads once one government does it, a lot of other people will see it as acceptable, and so it could be coming to your home country sooner or later, rather than later. And if you are in the UK, definitely consider like whether there is anything you can do about it. I don't know what your options are for your particular situation, but I think that people do need to get involved in these sort of privacy problems in politics and legislation and tackle this. So yeah, unfortunate stuff.
Yeah, I think another thing just before we like move on to the next thing, our staff writer at Privacy Guides, she wrote a really good article about this, so definitely check that out in the articles section on the website about age verification. And I think she went into like a lot of this in more detail, so if you're interested in learning more about that, I definitely would recommend checking that out, because it's definitely quite a large topic that has a lot of implications. Like Jonah said, like restricting everybody's access to websites is, I guess, good. It's a good intention, but in a lot of ways it doesn't end up turning out the way that people think. And we've already seen websites that some people might think should be restricted shouldn't be restricted, so it's definitely sort of like a slippery slope when you give that sort of control to the government to decide what content should be restricted and what content shouldn't. So yeah, it's definitely quite concerning to see that this is becoming more normalized, especially because we're seeing in like a lot of states in the United States are imposing age laws and sort of restrictions on websites already. So it's kind of concerning that that's happening.
Absolutely. Our next article is from The Verge. It's pretty similar. It's just about Blue Sky also rolling out age verification in the UK. They're using not Persona like Reddit. They're using a service called Kid Web Services, which is from Epic Games, but it operates pretty similarly. The only thing I would want to bring up about this specific case is that Blue Sky is very interesting as a social network, and I don't know how much we've talked about Blue Sky before at Privacy Guides, but because they of course promote themselves to be like this decentralized social media network, but you see a lot of like the tools and services that Blue Sky requires, like the apps, for example, are extremely centralized and locked down, and they allow the Blue Sky service to do something like this kind of unilaterally. So kind of the same age verification stuff that we were talking about with Reddit, but I think Blue Sky is a really interesting case because it is a service that purports to be decentralized, but they're not really giving you that choice or letting you choose providers that don't enforce these restrictions, as far as I know. So, yeah. Do you have anything to add about Blue Sky?
I guess, yeah, like considering how they sort of market themselves as like decentralized, do you ever see like this sort of um, age verification system? How would this even be possible on like a decentralized service like Mastodon or like the Fediverse? How would that even be possible? I don't think it would be, would it?
Yeah, so Mastodon's an interesting case. I know that they, in the 4.4 release, they did just add like an age verification system. It's not like they don't do verification like ID verification like this, but they do have an option to like restrict by date of birth during registration now, so you can, like the individual instance admin can choose um, like the age cutoff for their instance basically, which I think is a good thing for sure. Um, it's just it's hard to say like what'll be required of these platforms and like how big of a deal this will be in terms of like decentralized stuff because it really depends on how widespread age verification gets. I think that like for now, if it's one or two countries, at the end of the day, the UK or Australia or these other countries that are pushing for age verification, they can't really enforce their laws against a company that's only based in the US or only based in some country that doesn't have these laws. That are operated by like independent people. And I think that, like we see with the Tor project, for example, and we see with all sorts of different decentralized services on the internet, a lot of people, I think, are really interested in this mission to kind of make information available on the internet and that isn't behind censorship and government walls and that sort of stuff. And so I think there will always be um, people who will at least attempt to do that, um, as long as they're legally able to. I think it becomes a different situation if like these countries start really censoring foreign websites entirely, or if this becomes more widespread. Like we're not seeing right now in the UK or in Australia or other countries like that. We're not seeing the kind of censorship that exists in countries like China and Russia, where most websites that are like outside of their country are restricted. And I think that's a good thing, but it does, I think that more countries, it's very possible, especially if these laws take off and people are really convinced that this is a very serious problem and more of a problem than it actually is. I think that we might see more and more countries kind of trend towards that kind of isolationist approach, that like China and Russia are taking, where they really only allow most people to access like approved websites that are within their country or countries that are like-minded, and they really restrict outside information. And I think that it's a big danger, the possibility that the internet could become more and more fragmented because of these laws and their inconsistent application across different countries. So I don't know, like all of this stuff, it's always kind of a wait and see situation, but we're always it always seems to be trending in maybe not the best direction, so it's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think also just for anyone who's in the UK at the moment and you are concerned about this, which I think you should be, because like we've kind of already discussed, it is quite a concerning direction to go in. There is actually a petition, an official one, that is trying to repeal the Online Safety Act. So I will leave that in the chat if you're interested and you are from the UK, you can check that out and sign it because, yeah, I think you should. Even if it won't have that much impact by itself, if enough people are against this sort of thing, I think it will die because it's not really. I think once people are educated around the concerns of it, it will definitely be a lot less popular. So this specific petition needs to get more than 10,000 signatures, which means that the government has to respond to it, which it already has. And at 100,000 signatures, the petition will be considered for debate in Parliament. So if you're interested in that and you live in the UK, I've left a link in the chat, so definitely check that out if you are from the UK.
Sweet. Yeah, definitely check that out. I think that covers kind of all the news stories that we wanted to talk about today. But there was a lot of activity in our community and on the forum. So we wanted to highlight some of the discussions that are going on there. Um, the first, the biggest thread, and the one that I was personally most involved in this week, since the one I'm most familiar with, is about Tor and their removal of their OS spoofing in the user agent string. This happened a while ago, but the issue keeps getting brought up again and again by people. It is a really confusing topic, so I totally understand why people are kind of concerned about this, because it on the face of it, it does seem um, like a bad situation, right? So um, I think we covered a lot of good information in this thread, though, and this is one of the things that I like the most about the Privacy Guides forum in our community. It's that there are so many people who encounter issues like this, and they don't really understand what's going on, and it's a great place to kind of dive into their specific concerns and get them addressed um, more clearly than we otherwise would. Because I think that we, in this topic, if you're interested in this topic, I definitely would read this full forum post for more information. But we kind of covered the issue at hand, and kind of address some of the concerns more clearly than we did a few months ago when we were originally talking about this, and when Tor originally made this change. And so I think there's a lot of useful information in there about browser fingerprinting. And I think the takeaway that I had from this whole thread was that we definitely need to work on more browser fingerprinting resources. I know Jordan was talking about earlier how we're working on some of that stuff. We're finding experts in this field who we can interview and kind of get more authoritative information on this subject, because it's probably one of the most talked about and confusing to people topics in our communities that I see. It is a very complex topic. So hopefully we will have a lot more information about browser fingerprinting to share soon. But I think if you have any concerns about the Tor browser specifically and this change that they made a few months ago, or if you've been seeing any posts or drama about that sort of thing, definitely check out this thread on the forum, because there's a lot of good information there. And if you're still confused, you can definitely ask questions, and we'll try and figure that out. And based on the questions that we see, like from the community and the forum, that's the stuff that we're going to be asking people, asking experts to elaborate on more clearly, so that we can get the best and most clear information out. Because it's super helpful for us to know what you all and what other people don't know, because that's the stuff that we want to try and make more clear and get more legitimate information about out there. So yeah, I'm not gonna like go through this whole post, I don't think, but if that is a topic that you've heard something about, there's a lot of useful information there, and I think that there's a lot of information that will kind of make it into future browser fingerprinting resources that we put out. So stay tuned for all that. We'll of course update you in future episodes of this show if we publish anything. Did you get a chance to read any of these posts this week, Jordan?
I didn't really look through this entire thread. I just noticed there was quite a lot of discussion here around this topic, and I think, like you said, like this is literally one of the most talked about topics on the forum at the moment. Like, browser fingerprinting is sort of a pretty complex topic that's quite hard to understand, I would say, and I think this post in particular shows that there is definitely some misunderstanding around how it works exactly. And I think this discussion this week has been very interesting. So if you do think that this might be something you're concerned about, or you just want to learn more about browser fingerprinting stuff, there's some interesting discussion going on. And regardless of like the drama and whatnot, I think it's still very important that we have these discussions around changes that are made, and we, you know, acknowledge when something is, when we're not sure about a topic, we discuss it and make sure that we know that there's whether this is a threat or not. And I think that posting that to the forum was a good idea because there was a lot of good discussion around it, and now there's a lot of information in that thread that is going to help people. So definitely check out that thread if you're interested in that. But then there was also another one which had quite a lot of discussion around it, and that was around laptops for Linux. And I think that's kind of an interesting topic that I saw on there. And I think that's sort of a topic that we have yet to dive into on the website in particular. We don't really have any like hardware recommendations or like specific requirements for hardware for like desktop operating systems. So I think that's another topic that could be quite interesting to look into, because there is sort of this concern for people around, there's a similar concern around Android devices with like firmware updates. Like, are these laptops getting firmware updates? Are they getting BIOS updates? Are they getting like hardware and firmware support? And that was an interesting topic for me because the framework laptops specifically, I know a lot of people get those for their repairability and also like the sustainability of those devices. I think that's an interesting topic to discuss, especially if you're interested in a laptop for Linux, like a lot of people in our community are, because of the privacy benefits of running a Linux operating system. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out that thread. I thought that was quite interesting. Do you want to add anything there, Jonah?
Yeah, I think that those are all good points. I just noticed we're reaching the hour mark, and I haven't seen a lot of chats or questions on the forum, so we might start wrapping this up. But I would kind of say, as far as that hardware stuff goes, I kind of leave like a call to action to everyone watching this or anyone interested. Like, if you have opinions about this stuff or have knowledge about hardware, especially privacy and security and other stuff, definitely join the forum and share your thoughts about what we should do in terms of like a future potential recommendations, because all of our recommendations, of course, are community driven, and I can't even talk. It's a very complicated topic, and a lot of people have differing opinions on like what's acceptable in this space, and we really want to take all of that into account, because working on hardware resources and kind of putting guides together about things you should actually purchase in order to improve your privacy and security, I think all that would be very helpful, but it's a lot to get through, and we can definitely use all the help that we can get. So if that's something that you're interested in helping us out with, like all of our topics, we're always very happy to get all the help that we can get, basically. So check out these discussions on the forum if that's something that you're interested in, and get involved wherever you can. It would be great. That's all I would add to that.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you want to see something get added to the website, we're kind of reliant on the community and everyone to sort of chip in. And if you want to see something added to the website, you can start a forum post and get people talking about it, and that will sort of kickstart whether that topic gets added. I did notice someone mentioned, will you add weather apps to the website? And again, like, that sort of discussion needs to be had with the community, and whether that is in the scope of the website also needs to be discussed. So if you are like thinking, oh, why isn't this on the website? Why isn't this on the website? You can always just have a look at the posting guidelines on the forum. Make sure that like your post is, in the right topic and everything. And yeah, definitely people can put their thoughts and opinions there, and sort of get this discussion about that kickstarted. So if you are thinking of things that you think should be added to the website, you can always make a forum post and get people's thoughts on that so that we can kickstart that.
Absolutely, and I think weather apps specifically. I think there are a few discussions about it on the forum. I don't think it's been a very popular topic. A large part of like what drives us to research and write about topics is like how interested people are in that topic, and we base that based on like how much we see it talked about in our communities and on the forum. And so if that is something that's interesting to you, you should definitely vote on it, add your thoughts about it on the forum, add as much information as possible so it makes the research easier for the people who end up writing these articles. So it makes everything goes smoother, and it helps us prioritize what to work on next, because there are literally we get these questions a lot about like why don't you recommend a certain category of stuff on the site, and it's really because we want to be as thorough as we possibly can with all of our recommendations, but also there are just so many different categories that we could be working on right now, and we do have to narrow it down to like one at a time basically. And so the order of that is hugely impacted by like how interested people are in that topic. If everybody was interested in weather apps, we could have a weather app article done very quickly, but it's just not a lot of it's not something that I've seen a ton of people talk about, and I've seen a lot of people talk about and look into other things more, and so that's kind of the direction that we're at, and it takes a lower priority. But like I said, you as the community can definitely change that if you're really interested in a specific topic. And Canna Bitter in the chat also asked about privacy-centric translation tools, and I think that's kind of a similar situation. I know that a few different tools have been discussed on our forum before, like Libre Translate, for example, I know is one of them. I believe there's others. It's definitely something that we can look into more and get something done. It just there hasn't been a lot of demand. But if that is something that you want to see, again, if you know of privacy-centric translation tools yourself that haven't been discussed yet, share them with us, because we don't always know what we don't know. And if they have been discussed on the forum, share your thoughts and your experience with them, or ask any questions that you have about these tools for someone else to look into and kind of answer. Like if you have privacy concerns about a tool, it's always acceptable to kind of post those questions and see if somebody else will answer it. And hopefully that'll all get taken care of. But that's kind of how things work around here. It's very, very much community driven and prioritized. So that's kind of the approach to go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good sort of outline of the issue there. I guess I'm not seeing any more questions or comments, so I think we might be wrapping up today. So I'll hand it off to you, Jonah, to do the outro.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us for episode 10. We finally made it to episode 10, everyone. It's I know we took a long break, but I think that this episode went a bit better than the last one. I hope you all agree. Let me know in the chat quick or in the comments after this video if everything worked better and the audio was better. We're still working a few things out, but I think we're getting settled into this a bit, and hopefully it'll be even better next time. But yeah, I think everything should have been good, hopefully. All of the updates from This Week in Privacy are shared on our forum every week. So subscribe with your favorite RSS reader to kind of our announcements if you want to stay tuned. If you prefer audio, I don't think we're working on getting these streams published as a podcast. It hasn't been completely set up yet, but hopefully by next week it should be available in podcast form again, so you'll be able to subscribe to it that way. Otherwise, these videos are, of course, here on YouTube. They're also mirrored to PeerTube afterwards, so you're able to access it there. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this show, definitely consider contributing to privacy guides. We have, if you go to our website and click the heart in the top right corner, we have a donation link where you can kind of become a member or make a one-time donation and really support our work. Your donations not only support this stream and Jordan's videos, but they support our community moderators, they support our staff writers for articles, they support guest posts on the blog, and they support all of the research and other stuff that we're doing at Privacy Guides. There's a lot of stuff that we're working on and that we want to work on if we had more resources. It's always that's always the case, I think. But if you do appreciate what you're doing and you want to help us out, that is one of the best ways to do it. If you want to contribute in another way, joining us on the forum, being a part of the community, helping us make edits to the website, all of that is super helpful as well. You can also help us translate the website on Crowdin, and there's more information about that if you on our website or if you get in touch with us. But yeah, thank you for watching, everyone, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next week.